Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Mickra Hamiliton, CEO and co-founder of Aperiron Zoh Corporation, and we're continuing our epigenetic performance series. Super excited to speak with Lee Noto, an intimacy coach. She's one of my favorite favorite topics. And Lee is an intimacy coach and sensuality specialist. She helps powerful women cultivate powerful presence, emotional and erotic intelligence, so that they can create untamed intimacy in their romantic partnerships. Her current mission is to teach others about how to cultivate connection and intimacy in times of separation and isolation. And of course, now more than ever, Lee believes in the importance of pleasure and play as the antidote for widespread fear. And Lee, I'm going to say that is so amazing. And we are in this crisis place where we so need to, I'm going to say, double down on our intimacy, on our sensuality, the connectedness of relationship as we're at a distance. Even you and I at this distance, we can still be intimate in this way. And so tell us, please, really, what prompted you to move into this incredibly beneficial lane? And tell us more about your process.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I am thrilled and honored to be here and to be sharing space with you. You are just a pillar of, dare I say, badassness in the world. I don't know if there's a better word to describe it. So what prompted me to find myself in this world and on this path? I had a knowing from a very, very early age in life that this was a path I would go down, and I didn't quite know what it looked like. But I had a special curiosity and predilection for how our bodies functioned, for the results of how our bodies react upon touch, and for our sexual nature as humans. And so I followed the breadcrumb trail and had many iterations of what my sexuality looked like throughout my life, and have found that there are few areas in life that we really shy away from addressing as humans because of how riddled with shame they are. That's our finances, our health, sexuality. And, there are a few other main ones, but sexuality is one that is a really slippery slope. And in feeling so embodied in my sexuality, which came as a result of, a lot of lessons learned, my mission is to normalize the conversation, to re-educate, and to create a space that lets us know that this is absolutely natural. This is, in fact, how we all got to be here, and that it's our birthright to feel and experience pleasure and joy and play, and our creative our creative essence, which is our sexual energy.
And I am so happy to hear you say it in the way you say it. It's so amazing to me how we've taken something that's so incredible, so innate to our intelligence as a human system, and we've made it something awful to be ashamed of, to shy away from, to not want. And I think about that, and I wonder how we've been able to sustain our species, because it seems like we've just gone away from that beautiful connection. So we recognize, that there are a lot of reasons for that. Religion plays a big part of it. Wives' tales, the things that we embed from our cultural editors that have come down through the generational lines. And when we look at, when we take this big lens, we peel back and go from a complex systems perspective, how have all of these things diminished that connectedness, the creativity, the pleasure, the play, the spontaneous nature of that sexual force, which is really life force itself.
Yes.
Right? Go deeper into that.
Yes. And so I love what you're hitting on here, because this is absolutely it. Our sexuality is fundamental to who we are as humans. It is not a nice to have, or some people have it, some people don't, with the exception of people who identify as asexual, and that's a completely different story. But this is fundamental and core to who we are, the way taking in food or water is necessary for our very survival. And so we have over time neglected our biological priority, essentially. And, it's fascinating that we are now in a modern time where we're not only having sex to procreate, but we're having sex for pleasure. And this came, very recently, in fact. And everything in my belief is tied to our sexuality, because our sexual energy and how it flows through us is our life force. It's the very thing that breathes life into us. It's the very thing that has us feeling motivated, inspired, creative. And when you think of what those qualities are used for, from a utilitarian purpose, we use inspiration, motivation, creativity in our work to make money, to sustain ourselves, to connect with others. And in that, connection is very core, and it is a fundamental human need. And we connect through intimate experiences, be they sexual or not. And so these are things that we need as humans, and we have neglected them in favor of achievement and outcomes. And we're in a very interesting time now where we're being asked to slow the heck down, to go inward, because we can't go out the way we were going out before, and to really introspect and see what systems are outdated internally, because we're seeing external systems crash right now, the ones that aren't sustainable. Now we're having the chance to do that same introspection with what systems and beliefs are not going to serve my highest growth and evolution, and what do I want to do about it? Where do I want to be, and how do I get there?
Yes. And, I love the opportunity that we're giving ourselves with all of this. When we simply go, okay, if we're going to look at return on investment of this conversation, and we go, okay, if we didn't have a mental in the way that said, I don't feel like making love today, I'll put it off till after X, right? If there's no mental negotiator, and we recognize that it's fundamental, foundational to our thriving and flourishing, to the improvement of our immune system, right? Thinking of the chemistry that is created that really sends all these signals across the whole system that says, not only am I thriving, I'm really flourishing. I feel really good. And the more we can dump those chemicals as opposed to the fear chemicals and the stress, stay away from me, separate nature chemistry, right? The higher our immune systems are, the more we are able to really respond to anything in our environment.
Yes.
And so, if you went back to sort of more of an evolutionary lens of this process of intimacy and sensuality, and you look at not the circadian, but the ultradian rhythms of the human, and how, we had our dinner and then we made love and went to bed, right? Can you talk about how the loss of sort of that natural rhythm that we were in before all of the modern environment began, and how we have an opportunity to return back to some of that? That's helpful, yes?
Yes, absolutely. We as beings thrive on having just enough structure to allow our human organism to feel safe. And now I don't mean constrictive structure where we are planning down to the minute every second of every day, which can sometimes help our minds to function, but doesn't feel good on the body. Having that structure and routine around how we're engaging with others and having an understanding and agreements around these rules of engagement is so vital to creating a space for that which helps our human organism thrive. And you said it best. If there's one thing that we can do that has the highest ROI, so let's take this for a moment and let's view it as a business. Because a lot of times what I see couples and powerful women do is prioritize the business and success equal to over the relationship. And there's nothing wrong with this. However, it yields a certain outcome. So if we're looking at something that yields a very high ROI on our health as a human, on the thriving of our business, on the thriving of our family, on the thriving of any dream and goal we could ever imagine, it is being in connection and feeling intimacy with others, whether that's sexual or not. And then, of course, sexual intimacy releases a whole other host of feel-good hormones and chemicals. And so when we're talking about rhythms and routines, let's look at this from a business perspective, for example. When a business is thriving and when it's doing well, there are shared expectations for the team. There's a shared mission, there's a shared vision, there are team meetings to do retrospectives and goal setting. Why don't we have this kind of routine in our relationships? Because this is what sets the business up for success.
Yes.
Yet we show up to our relationships thinking that it's the mystery beyond, that it will all just work because it's the fairy tale or whatever. Usually not the case. I've not ever come across someone who had that.
Right.
And having the routines, which is why in my personal relationship, there will be times when we schedule time for intimacy, which may or may not lead to sexual intercourse. But when you think of a big meeting with an investor or someone, right, and that's on the calendar, you are preparing for that meeting. You know that that meeting is at 12 p.m. noon. You're not going to go and work up till 11:59. You're going to stop. You're going to ground. You're going to get the team ready. You're going to wear your best, and you're going to show up. And when we schedule and have rhythms, whether it's at the end of the day, in the morning, midday, for that shared sense of intimacy, then we get to show up as our best selves and as prepared so that we can bring our most loving, open-hearted selves to that interaction. And so, yes, I am on board with you around having some sort of routine or rhythm around intimacy.
Well, and Lee, what I just saw as you were talking about that, it was so important. We put on our best for all of the things that are super important to us, and often intimacy is an afterthought. And sometimes even the gym is a higher priority than actually making love.
Yes.
So it's super cool to think, that we can put a lot of mindfulness and awareness into the preparation rituals around that connection and love, around actually cultivating that beautiful chemistry on purpose, which drives higher creativity. Since Dan and I have been in this beautiful opportunity to stay at home, which is rare, right? We all travel and we all speak, and we've now been able to actually double our intimacy. Wow. And I can tell you that it's exponentially skyrocketed our creativity. We have so many cool programs under development and new things that are just constantly popping up because we're in an open and relaxed and just sort of beautiful, trusting space.
Yes.
It's so amazing. Can you talk about, I know you work a lot with psychology and somatics. Can you talk about how someone who might not be currently experiencing a lot of intimacy and actually might almost kind of be resistant because they're annoyed or irritated or stressed or whatever, how can they work with their system to kind of engender a little bit of connection, to get started, to really connect in a way that they can go, oh, that made me feel better?
Sure, absolutely. So the first thing I'll say about this is, who do we want to be when we're showing up to learn how to connect with ourselves? And one of the archetypes that I have found works really well is this archetype of mad scientist. One who is has the crazy hair, is playful and curious, but is relentless in their exploration. And so can we show up first as mad scientists in observation of what's happening inside of ourselves. And as a result of what's happening inside, what we are creating in the world around us. So if we show up as this mad scientist who has a theory or a hypothesis and is just going to test the hypothesis without attachment to the result, that's the big key, without attachment.
Yes.
You're just, I have a hypothesis, let's test it. If that doesn't work, we'll try version 2 and version 3. And so starting to be simply in observation of oneself. Hey, what's happening for me right now? What sensations am I feeling? What does this feel like? And so this is getting into the realm of somatic awareness. And so I'll give an example from my life. When I am in, and when I have been in the past in moments of conflict, especially with my partner, it felt like all systems went offline immediately. I would feel numb in the body because I was in a freeze response. And in freeze response, the body starts to release chemicals that numb the body because the body is perceiving an impending death. And the body is intelligent in that way and wants you to not have to, experience a painful death. So it releases chemicals. And so I would be numb, I'd go offline. And so my first question, whether you're in fight, flight, freeze, is, okay, breath. Because taking a breath lets the body know you're safe, you're okay, you're not running from a lion. And then what's happening for me right now? The breath creates even a second of space for there to be something different, an introspection, a pivot in action. And so that breath is very, very important. What's happening for me right now? What sensations am I experiencing? What do I need? And so I'd say, for people who are in this part of the journey, go for the very simplest things that are not yet laced with a lot of cognitive thought. We have the tendency to want to say, well, what emotions am I feeling and why? And who was a contributor to that? Great. It's awesome if you can articulate that. And when we are in a state of survival, which is what happens in conflict, we are not articulate beings most of the time. It's like, does my human organism feel safe? If not, removing oneself and coming back to safety by having hands on the body, taking deep breaths and saying, it's okay, you're safe. Once the safety is established and saying, okay, what do I need? Do I need a glass of water? Do I need to take a moment? What sensations am I feeling inside? Because the key here is to start to become aware of the sensations without attaching them to, well, this sensation means I must be feeling anxious and that means this. We are meaning-making machines and we will create a story anywhere a story can be created. And that story is not always the truth.
Correct.
So let's step back from the stories we create and say objectively, what sensations am I feeling? A tightness in my chest. Okay, great. A turning in my stomach. Awesome. So all we're doing is we're going down a checklist and we're just observing ourselves.
Right.
And that is the one thing I'll say that if by doing that can open up so much more. And certainly there are a number of other steps I can share, but this is the key component to really allowing our bodies to be open to deeper connection, to sharing ourselves, to receiving someone else, and to starting to be on the track of cultivating love, intimacy, and connection.
You talked about the way I heard it. You talked about sort of a numbing process, and I know a lot of women, and I can only speak in that lane, who find themselves to feel numb much of the time, and putting on a smile to pretend that life is feeling good. Yep. And in fact, so many are having to drink wine to feel any type of sexual energy, and or taking medication to maybe feel anything.
Yeah.
So what you just shared with us is, I think, the first step to reconnecting to the signals of the body that the numbness and sort of the life experience has kind of dampened or dimmed. So basically turning back up the feeling nature of the system. I remember when somebody said to me, I want you to put your energy in the bottom of your feet, in the cells in the bottom of your feet. And I said, what are you talking about? I couldn't even feel the bottom of my feet. I knew that my feet were there, right?
Right.
It tells you how disconnected I was from my physicality.
Mm.
And so it's interesting when one sits in this sort of numb-ish place, they don't really know how to get access back to the feeling state of their being. And so I think what you just guided us through is that essential first step. Now, what would be, once somebody was feeling those things again, what would be the next thing that you would guide toward, feeling more, experiencing more in the body?
Sure. So you hit it on the head, which is, one, we're definitely wanting to come back to a feeling state. The key here is doing less, not more. For most of us, and I can't say this definitively for everyone, but for most of us, we don't need more. We don't need more intensity. We don't need more information. And yes, I am a huge proponent of education. And in fact, that's a huge pillar of my work. And the information is here. The education is here. The wisdom, the inherent knowledge, it's all here already. And we have spent so much time searching outside of ourselves. And that is one of the fundamental discrepancies here, is that we think somebody else has our answer.
Yes.
And so I even tell my clients, I don't have your answer. You do. I'm just going to help you find it.
Yes.
And so after coming back to safety and starting to come back online, the idea of slowing way down. So the coming back to safety is momentary. What are the habits we're creating in our day-to-day and in our world around us? Doing less, taking more off the plate. Because when we stuff our plates, there is no room for feeling. There's no room for savoring. There's no room for nuance.
Yes.
And the feeling, we love chasing intensity and intense feelings, which is why a lot of us stay in drama cycles and in conflict cycles, because there is an intensity that we crave. And this is about taking this down. We don't always need intensity to have breakthrough. And so taking things off the plate, doing less, and then after coming back to this feeling state, then starting to really introspect, okay, what's happening for me? And creating a space to start to document in some way what's happening, because ultimately we want to be able to not only create intimacy with ourselves in what's happening for us, but I think our ultimate goal as humans who thrive on connections is to want to let someone else into this experience. Hey, honey, here's what's happening for me right now. I'm feeling a tightness in my chest because I was feeling emotionally unsafe after we raised our voices at each other. And, my need right now is for a gentle tone in our communication. And my request is that we take 5 minutes and then we come back to this conversation. Is that amenable for you? And what are your needs? And so we want to move into the direction of being able to communicate this.
Well, that is such a conscious place of precision language that you just defined. And, often what happens is that reactive nature where our triggers or our button's been pushed, and now, we hold the breath, or we shallow the breath, or we speed up the breath, and we really pull ourselves out of our, prefrontal cortex back into the emotional kind of limbic structures. The irrational nature pops up, consciousness leaves, and the opportunity for that aware conversation is either not available or so greatly diminished that it takes all of one's ability at that level to pull into that clarity, to disconnect the emotional status from it, or the reactivity status from it, right? And so if one found themselves to be in this place where I know that once I hit a certain line, I pop over that ledge,
Yep.
What is your thought on how one can maybe they know where that ledge is, and they take a tip or a strategy, they do something very quickly to interrupt going off the ledge?
Yes.
Best
Okay.
for them to do that.
Beautiful question, because so many of us find ourselves at our edge and walking over the edge time and time again.
And then apologizing.
And for a lot of us, it's like, holy crap, am I crazy? How is this happening again? How did we get here? How did I get here? What's happening? And I've said this in my own relationship, and I've heard many people say this. First things first, like you said, our prefrontal cortex is offline. So we're not necessarily going to solve the problem through a cognitive solution in that moment. The cognitive solutioning comes after. First thing is get into the body. Drop down and integrate with the body. And so some of the practices I use are breath, sound, and movement. Those are the three huge practices I go back to. So one, taking slow, deep breaths, letting the body know that it's safe. And letting out the gusts of air and imagining you're releasing the stress and tension from your body with the out breath. Sound. I cannot tell you how many of us are repressed when it comes to not only verbal expression, but sound expression, primal sound expression, because it's not socially presentable. And so I share with every single one of my clients, start making sounds. Pretend you are a wild animal. You can do this in the privacy of a bedroom. You can have a witness, fluttering your lips, barking, making grunts, like really as if you are just a primal person, like, ugh, and just letting it out. And what I love about this practice is you can let out and finish the activation of the emotion without spewing hurtful words at someone.
Yes.
That's the key here, because that's what damages relationships, not expression, but how we're choosing to express. So letting the sound out. I've had many times where I have grunted and screamed and yelled, and it turned into crying. And it was the most cathartic. I mean, it was as good as orgasm. It was an anger crygasm.
I love that.
Hugely helpful to coming back online. And then movement. So first thing, shaking. And this is what wild animals do. When an antelope narrowly escapes the grips of a cheetah, it finds its way to safety and it shakes. It shakes out the charge that it experienced because it had a near-death moment. We don't do that as humans. We do it as children, but then we learn it's socially unacceptable, and we don't do it as adults, which means we're storing all of that emotion and energy in our bodies. That creates dis-ease, disease, health problems. So immediately getting up and changing your physical state, stretching out, shaking, fluttering your lips, stretching, anything that lets the body sort of come back into wholeness and integration would be, three key tips that I can offer for coming back to, our sense of self.
Yes, and that clarity. Yeah, those are amazing, and I love them because we're not entering this whole thinking cognitive thing of how do I get out of this loop that I can't get out of because I can't get out of it.
Right, exactly.
And so it's like in the military, I taught conscious leadership, and I would tell the commanders, I would say, when somebody's in that state, you barking orders at them doesn't really help because they can't hear you. Right. And so it's always nice to pull back into the physiology, bring all those systems into alignment to see and be clearly in that moment. Now move to the folks who are stressed, but also know that they benefit from the intimacy. So what would be the resistance points? Maybe not necessarily resistance points, but what would be your best strategies for those people who already know how beneficial it is, but they just don't feel like it right now, to move into a state where they do it anyway?
Right. And there is a huge component of that is what is our willingness to expand beyond our edges in that moment. And what I would say to those folks is, can we even expand our definition of intimacy? So many of us operate with, okay, first of all, the idea of intimacy is it's immediately linked to sexuality, which is not the case. Right. Intimacy is seeing and being seen by another person and doing that for them as well. And so we can do that in platonic relationships and in romantic relationships. And so starting to expand our definition of intimacy, and then in our romantic partnerships, expanding furthermore. Intimacy does not have to mean that we go from 0 to sexual intercourse. And that is where most of us are, which means that there is even further pressure on the system to do something that maybe doesn't feel emotionally safe, maybe doesn't feel physically safe. And by safe, I don't mean, harm is going to happen, but that our organism doesn't feel completely relaxed. And expanding, okay, can we create a pleasure menu? And I do this with clients as well. Nice. Think of going to the Cheesecake Factory, right? Where their menu is 20 pages long and you have no idea what to order because there are so many options. Yes. But you know that whatever you order, it's going to be, it's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. You'll have a good meal. You'll at least get good cheesecake at the end. And so we can think of this in the same way, because all of this is, what is the lens through which we're seeing our intimacy? How are we viewing this? And are there things that would feel really pleasurable for us that we can negotiate? And again, coming back to the business reference, this is a negotiation. This is a back and forth to see what works for both parties, to find an area where both parties have their needs being met, feel expressed, feel loved and connected. And when we hold that as the highest intention, well, then great. Now what's going to allow us to feel loved and connected? Maybe it's intercourse. Maybe it's cuddling. Maybe it's taking a shower together. Maybe it's you playing with my hair and me rubbing my nails on your back. But let's start to expand the lens through which we see these things. And then maybe the opt-in for intimacy won't feel so scary or so much like something that we want to put off.
Well, and the potential to be rejected. I think that's a big stopping point for a lot of women and potentially men. I can't speak for men, right? So, but to really want that intimacy and then to be told by the other, I don't want to right now. I don't feel like it right now. I don't, right. That I think is one of the biggest things that keeps us from wanting to engage more and more in that way. I think at again, that fundamental level, we all need, desire, crave, want this type of intimacy with another, and the rejections of no are I think diving into the subconscious mind and saying, I'm not going to ask again.
Yeah.
So how to address that part?
Yes. So first things first is addressing that within ourselves before we sort of bring it to our partners. And and I'll say that for everything. Self-intimacy is so key here. We cannot hope to create something outside of us that we're not willing to cultivate within, because our outer world is an expression of our inner world. And so starting to allow a space to understand, okay, hey, you know what? As a human, not just as me, who I identify as, I don't like rejection. I don't want to deal with the fear of abandonment, because to my my reptilian brain, that means death. Being ostracized from the tribe or from my partnership means I won't survive. Mm-hmm. So first of all, acknowledging that there are some very real biological factors at play here. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. That is okay. And then starting to say, okay, so what happens for me when I perceive rejection? Okay, well, I feel a closing up of my chest. This is the sensation I feel. My stomach turns. And then, I perceive complete disconnection. And so when we can create a rich dialogue around what's happening for us, this allows us to be intimate and create intimacy with the other person through communication, through verbal communication, so that we can let them in. Because there's a difference in saying, God, I can't believe you just rejected me again. You never want to have sex. You this, you that. And we're putting the onus on the other person to be the gatekeeper for our sensual and sexual experience. That does not make the other person want to open up to us.
Right.
And so if we can take the responsibility for emotional and sensual leadership onto ourselves, how are we creating the commitment to step into that role? And that means getting to know ourselves in our inner landscape. And so yeah.
We're back to this awareness again, right? Self-awareness, what is happening in my inner landscape? Where in my physiology am I feeling it? What does it feel like? What do I need to do about it? Everything in life, it comes down to this wisdom.
Yes. It does.
Oh my goodness. So anything else that you'd like to share that you really feel can have a big impact right now in this time that we find ourselves? I feel like this is a playground, right? Mm-hmm. And I do, because I'm not running up and down the streets and even going to the grocery because it's delivered. I have so much more time to institute these beautiful new rhythms and rituals and things that I've always wanted to explore, So anything else?
You said it best. It's right now is a playground. We have a really unique opportunity, given where our human collective is. Given the fact that we have an opportunity, we're being forced to stay in. And by stay in our homes, stay in our hearts, stay within ourselves. And, I'll remark again on what we talked about before we hopped on, which was play. Play, play, play. When we can create opportunities for play, even outside of sexuality, can we put on a song and dance to it? Mm. Can we dance around in the kitchen while we're cooking? Can we listen to stand-up comedy that has us laughing and in stitches? That being in that place opens us up to our creative expression, to the desire to connect, to creating different options for how we show up in our relationships. When we're in that place of openness, we are sort of in a meta openness and we're in a micro openness within ourselves. Mm-hmm. And if there's one thing I can share with everyone, it's to stay in that place of play, because in the play, we're in our childlike nature. We're curious. We wonder about things. But why? How does this work? Tell me more. Versus thinking that we have it all figured out and this person is the way they are because of this thing. Yeah. That singularity does not allow possibility.
Right.
And so in order to stay in possibility, we've got to stay in play. So my invitation to everyone listening and watching is, what is one thing you can do for yourself today to allow yourself to be in the place of play? Mm-hmm. And I promise by doing that one thing, it will make so much of a difference.
And I so love that we're finishing up our time together in this way. Dr. Mario Martinez was on a couple of days ago, Biocognitive Theory, and he was talking about the one thing that these centenarians had. Well, one of the many things they had in common was this curiosity and this childlike joy of living. I think that when we inhabit that space, there's such an innocence. And it also puts us in a time where we had more of an innocence around touch and around hugging our friends and around being intimate with each other before we got told that, oh, don't touch her arm because that's not socially acceptable. Right. This is the thing that I find about medicine to be the one of the furthest pieces off track, is that they're no longer allowed to touch. Medicine healers have always touched their patients. And now all of a sudden it's like, you stay over there, right?
Yes.
And so I would love to see all of us return to an innocence that is expressive and creative and loving. And so that I love the way you finished that out. Thank you so much. Now, I have on here the ways to contact you, and this will be in the show notes. But Lee has Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. She works, with people privately in her coaching realm, and please reach out, check out all of her resources. And if any of you find the availability to work with her, she's incredible. And you can hear the aware conversation that we've had. Our reconnection to ourselves and to our sensuality, to each other, is, I think, one of the most important things we can do right now and moving forward as we move into this new way of living, whatever that may be. We can see it as thriving and flourishing and deeper connections, or we can see it as further separation. You get to choose that. We invite you to choose the intimacy and the connection because, oh my gosh, we're all running around happy and excited, as opposed to not happy and not excited. So, Lee, thank you so much. And everybody take care. We'll see you soon.